In Argentina, workers' union and social movements demonstrate for the democratization of justice regarding the impeachment trial against the members of the Supreme Court. In Peru, demonstrators mark 3 months since the beginning of the protests against Dina Boluarte's government. In the region of Puno, citizens declared a strike, denouncing police violence. And in France, labor unions held the 6th day of protests against the pension reform promoted by the President Emmanuel Macron. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, and these are the news. Human rights groups, workers, unions, and social organizations in Argentina carried out on Tuesday a demonstration against what they called the Judicial Mafia. The rally took place in front of the courthouse to call for the impeachment of the members of the Supreme Court. The demonstrators addressed the discrimination and neglect by the judiciary of women and sexual diversities on the occasion of the International Women's Day. The protesters reiterated their rejection of political persecution and the judicial war against Vice President Cristina Fernandez and several political leaders. On the other hand, social and political organizations in Argentina are mobilizing this Tuesday to demand for food prices, reduction of inflation, and salary agreement, among other demands. The demonstrators are expected to gather at the Ministry of Economy after walking downtown Buenos Aires. The protesters are also asking the government to take measures to revert the plans of the International Monetary Fund and the opposition sectors of the country, which are advancing inflationary strategies in the nation. And Argentina's government announces measures aimed at dismantling criminal organizations in the city of Rosario. The announcement was made by the President Alberto Fernandez during a message to the nation where he said he will send 1,400 federal troops to Rosario to reinforce the fight against drug trafficking and help mitigate violence in the city. The head of state said the soldiers would also carry out planning tasks in popular and residential areas. Fernandez reiterated that the measure seeks to recover order, social life, and security in the city of Rosario.
First, I ordered a reinforcement of up to 14,000 federal forces to be made available for the city of Rosario. We are going to make Rosario recover order and its social life in freedom and security. But above all, we will bring justice. We owe it to the victims of the mafias, and we owe it to the children of this city. We will not allow one more act of impunity.
Now we move on to other topics. Protests in Peru against Dina Boluarte's government have been taking place for 3 months now, while in the region of Puno, residents declare a dry strike to denounce police violence. Puno's residents said the strike consists of blocking transportation and commercial services as part of the pressing measures against the current executive and to denounce the deaths during the last days of protests. Residents from different parts of the department have arrived in the city of Puno to support the rallies. Protesters' representatives affirmed that the demonstrations will intensify after what happened over the weekend in Desaguero de Llave, where 6 soldiers drowned in a river and a woman was shot. Let's take a short break, but first remember you can follow us on our TikTok account at TeleSUR English, in which you will be able to see news in different formats, news updates and more. Other stories coming up, stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. In France, unions held the sixth day of protest against the pension reform promoted by Emmanuel Macron's government. Protesters reject Macron's overhaul of the pension reform system, which aims to increase the retirement age from 62 to 64. Meanwhile, truck drivers have blocked several highways in the country since Monday, while the train service and the public transportation in Paris have been disrupted by the protests. For their part, spokespersons of different sectors warned that the action could be extended if the government does not attend to their demands.
The battle begins today. In a few hours, we can say the whole country will come to a halt as one after another professions begin the fight in a large number of sectors that are decisive for the life of the country. The strike is renewable, and we must expect that tomorrow and the day after tomorrow will be days of very intense and justified social mobilization.
Likewise, the French Democratic Confederation of Labor Union Chief Laurent Berger hailed a historic demobilizations held in Paris.
The anger of working world faced with unfair reform is still as powerful as ever, and it is manifesting itself today an even more powerful way in the streets. I think that in light of the number of people mobilized, I can say that today we have a historic mobilization compared to the last 40-50 years.
And in the capital city of Tbilisi, Georgia, citizens demonstrated against the law of foreign agents. The mobilizations are taking place following the approval with 76 votes in favor and 13 against of the bill on transparency of foreign influence. According to the law, any organization that receives more than 20% of its funding from abroad should be qualified as an agent of foreign influence. Demonstrators claimed that with the adoption of this law, Georgia will separate from Europe, while at the same time they denounced repression by police officers. In response, the country's Prime Minister Irakli Gabrishavli argued that certain organizations in the Eurasian nation have used irregular funds donated from abroad to hold anti-government rallies and provocative actions. And now we move on to other topics. The Russian Defense Ministry reported that 90 Russians who were being held captive by Ukrainian forces as war prisoners were returned on Tuesday from Ukrainian-controlled territory to Russia. The return comes after a process of negotiations with Kiev. The agency said the servicemen were in moral danger while in captivity. According to the ministry, the released soldiers will be taken to Moscow to undergo rehabilitation in medical centers and are receiving all the necessary psychological and medical assistance. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, confirms on Tuesday that it will hold a meeting between Turkey, Sweden and Finland next Thursday to unblock the entry of the two Nordic countries into the warmongering alliance. The meeting, to be held at NATO headquarters in Brussels, will take place after Hungary, which also opposes membership, begins parliamentary debates on the issue to ratify or not its position. Jens Stoltenberg, the Secretary General of the alliance, announced the meeting at a press conference together with Swedish Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson from Stockholm. The Turkish government opposes the entry of Sweden and Finland into NATO because it accuses their governments of lack of cooperation in their fight against political activists of the Kurdistan Workers' Party, from whom Ankara describes as terrorists. On Monday, Chinese President Xi Jinping publicly criticized the U.S. and its allies for their attempts to contain China by threatening its development during the first session of the 14th National Committee of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference. Referring to the past 5 years of the Chinese Communist Party's rule, Xi indicated that they have been extremely unusual and extraordinary. Xi pointed out that the external conditions for China's development changed drastically, with a significant increase in uncertain and unpredictable factors, especially as Western countries, led by the U.S., subjected China to an unprecedented and unpredictable economic crisis. Researchers at the U.S. think that Quincy Institute for responsible statecraft believe that this is the first time Xi Jinping has publicly came out and declared that the U.S. is taking such actions against China. TeleSUR English continues to grow. You can now tune in from 33 different African countries through StarSat. Dial 461 and enjoy our Latin American alternative broadcast. One final short break, and we'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Israeli troops killed 6 Palestinians in Jenin during the latest deadly raid in a surge of violence in the occupied West Bank. Israeli troops reportedly entered a Jenin refugee camp on Tuesday, followed by heavy gunfire between militants as forces surrounded a house. Witnesses said rockets had been fired at a building housing a group of militants and reported gunfire in the streets elsewhere in the northern West Bank camp. According to Palestinian officials, 6 men had been killed, one aged 49 and the rest in their 20s, while 16 others were wounded. The Palestinian government called the use of rockets in the city an act of all-out war and accused Israel of destroying all efforts to restore stability in the region. Syrian doctors, in collaboration with the country's health directorate under the supervision of UNICEF, have launched on Tuesday the first cholera vaccination campaign. The program will be carried out by 1,238 mobile teams conducting home visits in the rebel-held northwest. The campaign is launched after a deadly outbreak of the disease last year amid increased fears of contagion following last month's devastating earthquake.
The Syrian vaccinate team, in collaboration with the Health Directorate and under the supervision of the UNICEF, has launched a cholera vaccination campaign which will last for 10 working days. The campaign targets people over the age of 1 year in the areas of Madred Misrin, Salmada, Aldana, Admed, and the city of Karen and its surrounding areas.
On Tuesday, Kenya's Ministry of Health announced the extension of the use of the world's first malaria vaccine in the lake endemic region. The decision follows Kenya's National Immunization Technical Advisory Group's recommendations, as well as that of the World Health Organization. Kenya is one of the 3 countries, together with Ghana and Malawi, where the FTS malaria vaccine is already in use, following the 2019 pilot tests in parts of the country. Since then, Kenya has provided more than 1 million doses of the 4-dose malaria vaccine to children across 8 counties. According to the Kenya's Ministry of Health, near 400,000 children have received at least 1 dose of the vaccine.
We have so far vaccinated close to 400,000 children. In Vihiga County alone, at least 25,000 children have been vaccinated against malaria. Within these areas, there has been a substantial reduction in deadly severe malaria, a drop in child hospitalizations, and a reduction in child.
And attacks between the army and the M23 rebels continue in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, despite the ceasefire declared between the 2 sides on March the 3rd. According to humanitarian and hospital sources, fighting between the army and the M23 had resumed on Monday morning on the northern and southern fronts of North Kivu province, despite the ceasefire, leaving several civilians dead and wounded. Both sides accuse each other of launching attacks against their positions. These confrontations come after the recent announcement of the failure of all regional initiatives launched to stop the M23 advance in North Kivu. A report by the United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, warned about maternal malnutrition in at least 10 African countries. The document warns that during the first quarter of the year, some 6.9 million adolescents, pregnant and breastfeeding women suffer from acute malnutrition, an increase from the 5.5 million during the same time in 2020. Among the most affected countries, UNICEF pointed out Burkina Faso, Chad, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Ethiopia, and Kenya. The international organization warned that in the recent decades, nutritional inequality has worsened, leading to a global nutrition crisis among adolescent females. And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.